Now, what about the person sitting 3 rows down? Do you know them? And what if I asked you right now to get up and to switch seats with a random stranger? How would you feel? Maybe a bit anxious, possibly awkward, definitely a little bit uncomfortable. But what are you afraid of? When I was in 3rd grade, I switched schools halfway through the year. On my first day, I got to school during lunch, and when I walked into the cafeteria, everyone was sitting in groups at little round tables. I didn't know where to go. That morning, my dad had told me to try and make new friends. He told me to be myself. But in that moment, faced with so many unfamiliar faces, myself wanted to run. And so I did. I ran all the way out of the cafeteria and back to the library, where I sat and I ate lunch alone. What was your most embarrassing memory? For me, it was that day in 3rd grade. I still remember feeling like everybody was watching me, staring at me as I ran out. And experiences like that one made me more anxious to put myself out there. It took me a long time to come over that fear. I don't blame myself. As a 3rd grader, and even now, talking to strangers is pretty scary, especially outside the structured organization of a meet and greet or student orientation. But I know that this fear isn't helpful. If I had just gone out that day and sat down in the cafeteria, I'm sure that I would have been friends. Which is why, this past fall, when I found out that I was going to Kyoto, Japan for my IQP, which is an interactive study abroad project that we do here at WPI, I decided, over my 60-day stay, to talk to 60 strangers. For better or worse, I was going to face my fear head on. I met the first stranger on my flight there. It was a 13-hour flight, and I spent the first 4 hours trying to summon up the courage to say something. Finally, somewhere over Alaska, I turned to the old couple sitting beside me, and I blurted out, "Hi!" But now they were both staring at me. This was as far as I thought. I had no idea what to say next. This was going to be such a traumatically awkward flight. As I started to contemplate spending the rest of the flight in the bathroom, my WPI hoodie came to the rescue. It turned out that the older gentleman was a professor of Japanese studies at Holy Cross, and his wife was from Japan. So over the next few hours, I got a crash course in Japanese, a list of restaurants that only a local would have known, and tons of advice on travel and Japanese books that I could have never found on the internet. As the flight landed, his wife handed me pages of handwritten notes. She jotted down everything that we talked about. And with that, they were gone. Throughout my experiment, I found out again and again that people like to talk about the things they love. There's such a wealth of knowledge in the people around us. And it's not just knowledge and experience that people are willing to offer. When you invite yourself into a conversation, you open the door to new people, communities, and experiences. These adventures are at the tip of your tongue, and it's as simple as saying hello. At a street market, I introduced myself to a lady while we waited for dumplings. She was learning English and was so excited to have a conversation that she paid for my lunch and even offered me her lake house if I needed a place to stay in the summer. Saying hello was terrifying, as usual, but it was a lot less scary once I realized that she was just as excited to meet someone new. Our project in Japan was to restore an abandoned shrine. We spent a lot of time out tucked away in the woods, and we rarely saw anyone. Except one day, when a lost hiker wandered in, he was looking for a famous shrine a couple miles down the road. And so I offered to walk into the trailhead and show him the way. As we walked, he told me he was from Boston. And not only that, he worked for a big tech company there as their executive director of artificial intelligence. As we parted ways, he gave me his email address and told me to reach out for an internship when I got back home. So there you have it. Networking doesn't have to happen at fancy cocktail parties. You can meet people anywhere, even in the middle of the woods. At a bar downtown, I introduced myself to the bartender, a captive audience. It turned out he went to UMass Boston a long time ago. I asked him more about his life and found out he was quite rich. He owned the bar, and he even owned a parade float in Gion Matsuri, which is one of the biggest annual parades in Japan. I was so intrigued, I kept asking him more about when the parade was and how many people were in it. Imagine my surprise when he asked me if I wanted to be in the parade. The parade is in July, so I didn't get to be in Gion Matsuri this time. But if I ever go back and want to be in a parade, now I know who to call. I told my family about this, and now they're planning a whole family vacation to Japan. So who knows, in a few years, there might be all of us in the parade. The trick to getting to know strangers is to ask a lot of questions. When I didn't know what to say, which was pretty often, I just asked anything like, where are you from? What is it like there? It took the pressure off of me to talk. And the reward for good listening was usually just a good conversation. But sometimes it could be a free place to stay, or a job offer, or an invitation to a parade. I tried my best to ask lots of questions. But since I don't speak Japanese, a lot of times I couldn't understand the answers. Plenty of times, I'd just end up singing with people, because even if we didn't understand each other's language, we still understood each other's songs. I met a fisherman on the train to Tokyo, and he asked me a question which I couldn't understand at all, except for the words at the end, John Lennon. So I guess he was a fan, and I started singing Imagine, and he joined in. A few nights later, I found myself at a local dive bar, singing Usher karaoke with 7 drunk college students who I'd never met before, none of whom spoke a lick of English, except somehow for the lyrics to Yeah. You know the one, yeah, 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 yeah. Music provided me a bridge over the language limit. A little while after that, I met the old man living across the street from our house. He and I listened to some Led Zeppelin, some AC/DC, kind of chilled out, and he took me for a ride in his 90s drag racing Nissan, something you'd expect straight out of Tokyo Drift. So in a way, music not only broke me over the language limits, but also the speed limit. Throughout this experience, I also found out there were times when it's better to say nothing. On my first visit to a Shinto shrine, I tried saying hello to the lady who was praying next to me. It turns out that a shrine is a terrible place to start a conversation, because most people don't like being interrupted while they're praying. Some moments are hits, some moments are misses. When you expose yourself to an unfamiliar situation, there's a range of experiences that you can have. One night, I ran into some supposed construction workers on our rental on a rural island, a few blocks away, and we made a lot of mac and cheese that night, so I offered to bring them some from the house. When I returned with the plates, my friends grabbed me and told me we had to leave immediately because they tried to steal one of our phones. I didn't want to endanger the group, so we left. But first, I gave them the mac and cheese and asked them what was going on. They claimed they only wanted a phone to take a group picture of us. So maybe they were thieves, or maybe they were just hungry guys trying to return a favor. Stranger danger is not always right. We're conditioned by our society to be afraid of the people around us. But there's a fine line between fear and curiosity, and a lot of us are on the wrong side. On my last day in Japan, I was really sad to be leaving. I felt more like sitting in a depressed silence than having a conversation on my taxi ride to the train station. Still, it was my last chance to use Japanese, and so I started talking to the driver about our homes. He was from Aomori, the cold northern province of Japan. He taught me a dozen words for snow, because in Japanese, there's a different word for hard snow, soft snow. and snow that piles up in fluffy clouds like mochi. He spoke so fondly of his home and how he hadn't been able to go back there in so long. And I think some of his fondness must have rubbed off on me, because as I left, I was also just a little more excited to go home and to see snow again. Talking to strangers can have such a powerful impact, but it can also be exhausting. So maybe you don't have to talk to 60 strangers like I did, but how about just one? Right now, I want all of you to turn to the person sitting next to you, in front of you or behind you, somebody that you've never met before. If you need to get up, you can get up. It's your life and your connection, so take the first step literally. You can ask them their name or how their day's going or what they did this weekend. It's up to you. You have 60 seconds to start the conversation. Hopefully, for each of us in here now, there's one less stranger and possibly one more friend. I just met Lucia and Alex. Lucia's from Cape Verde, and she says it's warm even here. I wish I had that mentality. I didn't get there. And Alex plays some basketball, so I think we're going to ball after this, right? Throughout my experience in Japan, there were plenty of awkward moments. At times, I probably embarrassed myself, but the risks were worth it. So next time you find yourself in the Unity elevator or stuck next to someone on campus shuttle, why don't you just summon up your courage, take a deep breath, try turning to that person sitting next to you. Just say, "Hi, how's your day going?" I'm not saying that every person you meet is going to offer you a free job or a free place to stay, but what I am saying is that it's important to be open to meeting new people and to the opportunities that come with it. As humans, we're wired to create social connection, and yet so many of us shy away from it because we're afraid of rejection or we're stuck in our own little worlds. So next time you're out and about, take a chance and talk to a stranger. You might be surprised at what you discover.